Welcome to IRA's Livestream, episode 120, where the title is Here's to All My Haters, and I have an abundance of those. I collect haters as a sign of my success, and it's always fun to see them bitching on social media about my content. I'm sure that a few of them will show up um, here on this episode, and I'll be disappointed if they don't, quite frankly. Because nothing really gets the juices going like a bunch of Latter day Saints who think that they're going to worship the devil. Hold on. Let me get what one of my haters referred to as my impotent beer. That is my near beer, my non alcoholic Coors Edge. So, when I stopped being a Latter day Saint, I realized that I just like the taste of beer. I'd always liked the taste of beer. If they made a non alcoholic scotch, I'd drink it. I do believe that drinking alcohol is generally wrong and also terrible for you. And when I did drink alcohol, I drank my share and everybody else's share too. Not that I was ever physically dependent on it. I did have people ask me if I felt like I might have a problem. I said, no, I have a solution. Because when I drank and I smoked, you know why people drink and they smoke? Because of all you non-drinkers and non-smokers and what insufferable pricks you are. Like, you're the reason people are alcoholics. And you're the reason people just need a smoke break in order to get through the day. So they make a deal with themselves. If they can just get to their first 15-minute break without strangling you for being an insufferable prick at work, they can have a cigarette. And so many of you will never know how close you came to being murdered at work by your coworkers for being jerks, because cigarettes and alcohol are the things that enable people to tolerate you. And when I was working and I was managing and all of the things that I've done in my life, I will say this, that Camel Wide was really delicious at my first 15, on my lunch break and after my lunch break, and then my next 15, and then right before I got on my car and went home. So I was at most smoking cigarette, like 5 cigarettes a day. I was never like a hardcore smoker. I did enjoy pipe tobacco. And as an older, wiser, more seasoned man, I now realize that I still like the taste of beer. I don't like alcohol. I don't like hangovers. Around 35 or so is when it started to hurt to party. And then, of course, I found out I was going to be a dad, and I immediately quit everything I was doing cold turkey because, when you're on dad duty, um, you can't really have a buzz, and you can't have anything that's going to dull your senses, because your kid, needs you to be on all the time, and being a father is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, to the limited extent that I've gotten to enjoy it. Um, it's this little piece of you, and at the same time, it's someone who is completely different than you, and so my daughter is out there tonight, and she's hopefully living her dream. She seems to be a happy kid. Um, she has a lot of activities, a lot of different interests and pursuits, none of which align with mine. She's the complete opposite of me in many respects. She's much more social and friendly than I ever was at that age. But I hope that she does inherit my ability or willingness to slug it out with people who do things like rape kids and adults and threaten and bully and intimidate. I hope she has the kind of moral fiber necessary to take aim at that and to oppose it. Um, I hope that that's the part of me that she inherits. I don't really care that she would inherit much more of me. I'm kind of glad that she's not like me in many respects. She seems to be a neurotypical person, and she seems to be a normal human being, and that's a blessing. I worried that I would have a son who was like me, who just always wanted to fight at the drop of a hat. And I didn't have a son. I had a daughter who's really sweet and really nice. And the other night I was on a live stream, and it was a guy in the comments who was asking me questions about my daughter. Because here's the thing about these people. They don't comprehend or understand, like, how fucked up they are. And how inappropriate they are. Asking questions about other people's kids. I'm not worried about answering those kinds of questions, because here's the thing. If you fuck with my kid, there's going to be consequences for you and anybody else who's involved. So let's just get that out of the way. You can say whatever you want about me. You can do whatever you want about me, And people have, I have a stalking injunction for people I've never met or interacted with in real life, because Utah's a joke of a state. And some of my haters love to throw that in my face as though I'm going to be deterred by it, even though I've openly acknowledged it. Because I don't give a shit. I never stalked those people. I never followed them. I never did anything in that stalking statute pertaining to anything with the two people, Joe and Lee Binion. They want to go to court every single time I say their name. It's directed at us and we're emotionally distressed. It's like, fuck off. You're not emotionally distressed. You're not shit. Nobody's coming. Believe me, if any of the dozens of people that you've abused or mistreated over the years haven't taken a shot at you, nobody else in this bullshit state is going to either. And that includes me, because, I have a kid I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for protecting her and providing for her, and I can't do that behind bars. So that's the whole dividing line for me, is, as much as I dislike a lot of these people, I'm not doing anything to hurt them physically, because I have other obligations and responsibilities. I have an immediate family I'm responsible for. That's my wife and my kid. I have an extended family, including my siblings and their kids, that I'm responsible for. And so consequently, I've got to self-moderate. But one of the things that I find really interesting is that these people come to my social media and they want to talk shit. And I don't do the whole going back and forth with people. I cut right to the chase. If you want to have a problem with me, I just tell you to name the time and place. Like in terms of a boxing or MMA gym. If you really want to knuckle up and get busy, well, that's kind of my game. It's always been my game. Like, I don't go looking for trouble with people, but if you want to get it popping, we can get it popping all day, every day. I don't give a shit. So for my haters, who are plentiful in the state of Utah, they tend to fall in certain categories. There are the people who believe that sexual abuse isn't a real problem in this state or in the world in general, that it's far less commonplace than it actually is. You got 1 out of every 7 or so high schoolers in the state of Utah who have been subjected to sexual violence over the course of their lives. You got any number of people, you have a 2.97% conviction rate. So Utah is effectively a sanctuary state for rapists. That's the reality of it. That's what you're sending your wives and daughters out into. It's a sanctuary state for rapists and sexual predators. And if you don't like the fact that I say that, well, that's really tough shit. I'm sorry that you don't like it, but nobody's forcing you to watch my live streams or my podcast or read my content or anything like that. Nobody's forcing you to do that. But these people in this state like to find things that they can be pissed off about. And they like to attribute things to people in this space that weren't said or done. To wit, I got one of them saying that I said Russell M. Nelson was eating babies. He didn't name me by name. I refused to watch his bullshit series on ritual abuse. His name is Jonah Barnes of Lord Radio. He's a plagiarist. Radio Free Mormon covered that quite extensively over a couple of episodes. And he did a multi-part series debunking ritual abuse. And I wasn't too worried about it because Jonah Barnes is a deeply unlikable human being. And unless you're one of his homers in his choir, he's not going to generate any traction. So the people that are in his audience already fall into those two categories, like the denialist or the abuse truthers who want to minimize everything and want to gaslight victims. And then, of course, a fair amount of them are people who want to quibble over what rape is. They want to debate the particulars of it and whether or not a specific instance of abuse was actually rape. Here's a clue for you, Ward Radio guys. If the girl says no and you keep going, that's rape. I know it's real hard for you troglodytes to get that. It's confusing because sometimes no means yes. In the world of Ward Radio fans, in the world of, Mormon priestcraft podcaster fans, no means yes. Of course, yes never means no in these people's minds, but no means yes. So that's the idea that I'm going to change one of those people. I'm going to change their mind in terms of material. I mean, you could have videotaped evidence of this. You could have a ritual abuse rape on video with all the candles and all the robes and all the masks and them chanting their little satanic mumbo jumbo. You could have all that shit on tape, and they're still not going to believe it's actual ritual abuse. It must be staged. It's not real. It's just made up. It's a satanic panic. And so they go through the same little tropes that are tried and true among abuse denialists or abuse truthers, as I call them, members of the Ostrich Club and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they want to pretend like this isn't happening. Because a good many of them, if it was acknowledged, then, some of their behavior would come under scrutiny, and whether or not that behavior qualifies as sexual abuse or rape. That's the reality of it. And in Mormon male perspectives, especially in the Western United States, they want rape to be as gray of an area as possible. Because if they have to get affirmative consent, that is, the woman has to effectively say yes to sex, then they would never get laid. Like that's the reality of it. They would never get laid. And the vast majority of them only get laid is because the only reason that that happens for them is because the girls that they marry are conditioned from birth to believe that it is their sole purpose in this life to sexually fulfill their priesthood holder and to be good little Molly Mormons and do whatever their priesthood holder says. Because here's the thing in like Mormondom that's really kind of fucked up is in the resurrection, your priesthood holder has to stand at your grave and call you forth by your secret name. And you don't know his name. You don't know his secret name because you're not going to resurrect him. He's going to resurrect you. You ever think about these Mormon priesthood holders who, die pissed off at their wives? They really think about, their mortal probation with that wife. And they think to themselves, standing at the foot of her grave, I don't really want to do eternity like this. You ever think about that? Like them just leaving Molly Mormon in the grave? I do. Because the vast majority of Mormon men that I've met over the course of the Hamlin case, especially in Utah, are sacks of shit who might actually do something like that to their wives or their children or whatever. Like, they're hateful, misogynistic pigs, and they have a problem with the idea that women have agency that could go against their own agency. Women can have volition that leads them to differ from the opinion and perspective of their priesthood holder. Because they're bitches. And the truth of them, the truth of many of them is even if their wife is sexually open to them, they would rather watch another man get it on the internet than have sex with their wives or spend time with their families. Like that's the reality of Latter-day Saint husbands in certain areas of this country. They're not good men. They're not even men. They're just fucking perverts. And that's why they give their daughters marriage lessons. And that's why they hope and they pray diligently for the return of plural marriage and everything that is accompanying plural marriage in the way of, oh, my place in the celestial kingdom depends on me having multiple wives, and my wife's place in the celestial kingdom depends on her acquiescing to me having many wives and concubines, because that's what the doctrine is called, right? The doctrine of many wives and concubines. Because ultimately polygamy, like sex, or like this abuse, sexual abuse, it isn't even about sex, it's about power. It's about exerting your power so much so that you obviate someone else's consent. And if you're that type of a person and you have that type of character or lack of character, then you're a sack of shit, in my opinion. And if you want to take it up with me sometime, I'm not hard to find. If you want to quibble about it, all you got to do, since apparently a lot of you know my social media on Facebook and X and here, all you got to do is drop a line in the comments, and I'll be happy to beat you up, and we can knuckle up. But at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, and that's the difference. I'll fight anybody. I'll go toe-to-toe with anybody, anytime or any place, in self-defense. And I don't care if I win or lose. And that's the advantage I have over most people. Like, I will die on my feet before I ever live on my knees. Like, that's the reality of it. And a lot of you people who want to quibble over the definition of abuse, the definition of consent and sex, like without even realizing it, you're outing yourselves. Because real men don't rape and real men don't give their daughters marriage lessons. You're a fucking pervert. And your pappy who taught you this, and your grandpappy who taught you, and your pappy this kind of perversion, you're fags. Like, you get off on abusing women and children who are conditioned from birth to comply with you in a deeply fucked up belief system that doesn't resemble anything outside of the Western U.S. in terms of like Latter-day Saint belief or practice. And I know this because I used to be a Latter-day Saint in Texas and Florida. And those Latter-day Saints, Utah Latter-day Saints can't hold a candle to them. They're good people. And they don't swing on their wives, and they don't like have porn addictions. Like, as absurd as that whole concept is, no one's ever had to administer Narcan to somebody for overdosing on porn. Like, that's just the reality of it. And so when you hear these pathetic, sorry excuses for males talking about how they're addicted to porn, or the devil made them do it, or this, that, and the other, the adversary got a hold of them, and that's their out. That's why they don't. That's why they never take accountability for their decision to molest or rape somebody else. That's why they deny the existence of it. So we got Nathan Chadwick. He's hater number one tonight. I have a lot of issues with Utah Mormonism, but this is just nonsense. Well, I can assure you, as someone who spent 4 years looking into it, it's not nonsense. But congratulations with looking the other way or sticking your head in the ground. You know, congratulations with that. Leave your need for validation in the chat section, Nathan. Like, you know, the tide is turning and more people are waking up to this issue. And more people are accepting that ritual abuse is real and it does happen. More and more people. Nathan would like us to know that he's not a hater. I don't really care if you are or you aren't, Nathan. Like, I've actually found a lot of your stuff very interesting. Well, good. I'm not looking for interesting. It's true. Like, David Lee Hamlin is a sexual predator. A lot of the people around him are sexual predators and drug users and other forms of degenerate behavior. To be clear, I mean, I used a lot of drugs in my 20s. Primarily psychedelics and pot. Didn't like a lot of stimulants, you know. And what I would say about drugs is they can be a lot of fun. But here's the thing, I never used drugs as a crutch for hurting people or as an excuse for my own deficiencies as a human being. I never used drugs as an excuse for that. If I broke it, I bought it. And I firmly believe in accountability. I mean, if you can use drugs and still make it to work on time, still do a good job while you're at work, I don't have a problem with it. Personally, I no longer use drugs. It's something that stuck with me even after leaving the church. Just like the non-alcoholic beer is something that stuck with me. I just like having a cold beer, even if there's no alcohol in it, after a long day. And so my wife started her process, so I told her I was going to come down and live stream while she does her before bedtime process. in general, I despise men who aren't responsible, who aren't masculine, who constantly shove off accountability for their own shitty decisions on their wives and kids or their upbringing or anything else. I am what I am because I chose to be that. Like, it's that simple, and you chose to. And a lot of people in LDS culture in the Western United States firmly believe in something other than accountability. I don't even know what I'd call it. But it's a complete lack of responsibility. There's always an excuse for being shitty or horrible to people. And it's antithetical to who I am. Like, if you're going to be an asshole, at least own it. It's that simple. If you're going to be an asshole, own being an asshole. Like, own whatever mistakes or deliberate decisions you make and know the difference between the two. And the issue that I have with a lot of Utah men who cheat on their wives, and when you cheat on your wife, you're also cheating on your children, who want to watch porn as opposed to spending time with their families or their wives. Like, I know what your priorities and your values are. By where you spend your time. And every day between about 5:30 and 8:30, 9 o'clock, you know where my priorities are because that's my wife's time. Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, about 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., my time is spent with my wife. I usually take her out to breakfast on Saturday morning. And I go run errands with her, you know. That's the thing. She gets my time. And then Sundays are for church and whatever else. Like, usually getting ready for the week ahead. But you know where my priorities are by where and how I spend my time. And I spend my time with my wife. I go to work and I go home. And when you do that, guess what? Your life gets really simple and you don't get into a lot of shit that you shouldn't be involved in as a husband or a father. And in Utah, there are these men, I don't even know if I'd call them men, but they constantly want to vacillate and hem and haw. Well, I have these problems. Well, no shit, you have problems. And your first problem is misplaced priorities. You don't invest your time in your wife and your kids, and you wonder why your wife and your kids, your relationship with them is so fucked up. Because you'd rather watch another dude stick his dick in somebody than spend time with your wife and your kids. At the end of the day, in my book, that makes you gay. You want to watch another man get his swerve on with a chick on the internet, you want to try to live vicariously through that, you're a pervert, you know. You suck. And that time is time that you could invest in your wife. It's time you could invest in your kids, but you don't. And I don't draw a lot of distinction between men in that paradigm and men who actually, you know, cross the line and abuse their wives and their kids or anybody else. I just don't, because I don't share any values with them. I don't share any common ground with them. And I don't want them in my life. I don't want them in my community. When I was a Latter-day Saint, I certainly didn't want them in my church. Like, I didn't want that shit. I mean, my daughter's got to go to the ward or the stake center or wherever, and I don't want that guy around my kid. I don't want that guy around my wife. I don't want that guy around my friends' wives. Like, fuck that guy. Like, if you're going to be a member of the club, play by the rules. And we all knew what the word of wisdom and the law of chastity and the law of consecration were. We all knew what the rules were, but some of us aren't following those rules. And the problem is the church is very selective in its enforcement of those rules and its application of those rules to membership. So certain members are more equal than others, and I think the Hamlin case has illustrated that point perfectly. It's only when you get so far off the rails and unhinged that you start calling attention to yourself in a way that negatively impacts the group that you're in, that they're actually going to do anything. So when you're like Gordon Bowen and you're making thousands of phone calls to gay escort lines and getting fired from work because you have to watch porn, gay porn on work computers, then they're going to do something. They're going to like excommunicate you. Like when your wife raises enough hell and your fellow perverts raise enough hell because they want to distance themselves from you because you're so damn reckless and off the charts crazy, then they're going to do something. They're going to excommunicate you. And that's what happened to Hamlin. That's what happened to Gordon. Because Hamlin wanted to be a medicine man and a Latter-day Saint and a clinical therapist. And he wanted to hold his arm to the square while he's chanting all this mumbo-jumbo in therapy sessions and having sex with his patients. That's the level of crazy you have to be for these people to do anything to you. But as long as you're covert and you don't question the church's doctrine, you can fuck a kid. You can have sex with your patients. They don't make a big deal about that. At most, you might have to go to LDS Social Services and go through some church-paid-for counseling. But they're not going to do anything outside of that. They're going to try to keep it in-house, and they're going to discourage your victims from going to the police and reporting, because that's their stick, right? That's what they do. They try to keep it in-house and conceal the extent of the abuse when the average pedophile has between 150 and 180 victims over the course of their life. And so my haters who are upset because some of these people were named by 3 girls who filed a bunch of victim statements in the criminal investigation in 2012 to 2014, they named their victims, like 140 of them. And so what you see on IRA is the culmination of publicly available documents and sources. And then you start digging into what those sources and publicly available documents allege, and you start finding out that David Lee Hamlin's brother-in-law, Tim Tuttle, was arrested and convicted because he confessed to sexually abusing his adopted daughter. And that adopted daughter, in her statement to the authorities, said that she had told her older sister about the sexual abuse that Tim Tuttle was inflicting on her. And as it turns out, that older sister said, "I know how that feels." Because, if you think Tim Tuttle had one victim, I got fucking news for you. He and his wife, David Lee Hamlin's little sister, Cree Tuttle, were allegedly members of the Church of Satan. And whenever they were in Provo from California with their kids, they adopted a bunch of kids. They would show up to CS ceremonies and CS events, and they would be full participants in this type of abuse. And of course, beyond David Lee Hamlin, what else do you find? You find Gordon Bowen's journals and the DCFS investigation into abuse allegations where he was digitally penetrating his children. He was giving them something that is almost identical to what the Hamlin sisters called a fishy, which is where the adults in their group digitally penetrated their anuses. Because apparently that's just what these people like doing, is sticking their fingers up a kid's ass. Because they can, And then you find out that David Lee Hamlin was Sterling Van Wagenen's therapist, and that Sterling somehow went to the police, was interviewed by the police for allegations by a male victim, and he admitted that he committed the abuse, but the police didn't prosecute him. The county attorneys didn't prosecute him because the guy didn't want to testify, and why the fuck would he? I mean, it's 2.97% conviction rate in this state for rape. What victims have to go through to report and disclose and get their perpetrator prosecuted is fucking absurd. Who would want to go through that meat grinder? But, of course, Sterling didn't just have one victim. None of them ever have just one victim, and he was later convicted of sexually assaulting a female victim across 2 different jurisdictions. And Sterling is in prison. And guess who Sterling listed as his therapist, who was helping him work through some of these issues? Oh, yeah, David Lee Hamlin. Guess who Gordon Bowen's therapist was in New York? David Lee Hamlin. So here you have a sexual predator counseling other sexual predators. You got Gordon Bowen's journal. According to Justin Riggs, the excerpts that he was able to obtain, he talks about all the ritual abuse. All the abuse is satanic, but ritual abuse is greater in power and potency. That's the fucking level in this state. And then you read Gordon's co-workers who said that in the 80s he was enlisting them to come to his house and stay with him overnight because he said he was being physically assaulted by evil spirits in his house, because, that's not at all mentally fucking unhinged. But hey, it's all satanic panic. It's all made up from whole cloth. It's all bullshit. None of it has a shred of truth to it. According to my haters, who are all self-anointed experts who've never read any of the Hamlin victim statements, never done any work on their own to get to the bottom of this, they just, they parrot things like the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, because the only thing that they can find to hang their hat on is, an organization that's... So I'm almost caught up, but Justin originally blocked me because I was talking shit, and Connor Boyack, the Tuttle Twins, I think it's a book story. True story. Anyhow, don't even mention it. I'll delete. Well, I did mention it. I am the Axeman. Missed above, thanks for standing your ground for the truth of all the children. Well, thank you. At the end of the day, if you don't want to stand against rape and sexual abuse of any sort, which the other night, this kid named Romano was in the chat, and I asked him, do you oppose sexual abuse? And he couldn't give an answer. He kept ducking the question, which is all the sign that you need of where that person actually stands. Because it's really simple yes or no answer. Like, if we just did an impromptu survey of the 7 people viewing this episode, how many of you in the chat oppose sexual abuse of any sort? Like, go ahead and enter. Like, yay if you oppose it, nay if you don't. Let's see how many of you will actually come out and, enter that information in the chat. Like, at the end of the day, you don't have to. I don't control what you do, but I do think it's informative that in this state, when you have conversations with people about a 12-year-old who was sexually abused, any female child who was sexually abused, and they want to talk about how that child beguiled her 40-plus-year-old offender or abuser. That's an actual thing that has come up repeatedly over the past 4 years. And you just sit there and go, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what exactly is wrong with you on a cognitive level that it's that hard of a concept to understand that a 12-year-old can't consent to sex and doesn't beguile a 40-year-old? Here's Jacob Johnson. Oh, reliable. My wife and I strongly oppose sexual abuse of any kind. There you go. You see how simple that is, people? You see how fucking simple that is? Anybody can do it. Anybody can publicly stake out a position against sexual abuse. And anybody can comprehend that sexual abuse is when someone who's incapable of consent, that is a child, or someone who's incapable of consent because they are mentally incapable of consenting due to some sort of cognitive defect or developmental disability, is still subjected to sex. They're still subjected to sexual behavior by somebody who is just basically ignoring their obvious deficiencies, their inability to consent legally or otherwise, or to understand the significance of what's going on. They just use them as a sex toy, as a masturbation sleeve. That's what the fuck is going on in this state every single day. Every single hour of every single day, because Utah is infested with sexual impropriety. You think you're living in like the 40s or 50s when you're talking to husbands who articulate their view that there is no way that they can sexually assault or rape their wives because I'm married to her. And you're just sitting there going, oh, what a lovely marriage you must have. What a fortunate woman your wife is to be married to you, sir. Like, that's the fucking level in this state. It's much more frequently expressed in interviews than in any other state that I've lived in. In the porn stuff and everything where they try to excuse that. These are active, endowed, Temple recommends Latter-day Saints who are open about the fact that they watch porn. They're open about it, and they do not seem to comprehend that the time that they spend doing that comes at the expense of their families. And if they do comprehend it, they don't give a shit. They feel entitled to it. I mean, I work hard. I provide a good living for my wife and my kids. And they shouldn't begrudge me this one little thing. My porn. Like, honestly, it was old 2.5 years in to talk to these fucking people. It was old then, and it's only gotten older as time goes on. And when you're sitting there and listening to like haters try to deny this, the denialists, the abuse truthers who want to pretend like, oh, this isn't happening, or it's just a blip here or a blip there. I forget which LDS authority said that shit. But they did. And you spend all the time like taking darts from people who think that isn't a problem. Sexual impurity of any sort is a problem. It's a foundation for everything else that comes after it. Like that's the reality of it. That's the problem in the state of Utah is you have a bunch of priesthood holders who aren't living up to their covenants. And it appears to be not just Utah, but also most of the western U.S., Colorado, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho. It appears to be something that in the LDS, in the Western U.S., there's a bunch of men who don't want to live their temple covenants, don't want to live the oaths that they've taken. They want to be Jack Mormons with the temple recommends. And fuck them, because you're undermining the brand. The thing that attracted me to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was the higher standard. The fact that the Mormons I knew walked the walk. Like, they didn't just talk about it, they were about it. And they had great families and reaped the rewards of their commitment to their families and to sexual purity and to basic morality. Those things pay off. And then you come out here and you realize that there is a thriving swinger subculture, and these swingers go to certain gyms in order to hook up with each other. That's the fucking level here. You talk to bishops who are sitting there and saying that a substantial portion of their service as a bishop involves counseling members in their ward for porn addictions or open marriages. And then you see, like, the dividends burst forth in the church's permissive attitude and its refusal to enforce its own rules with any consistency. You see that burst forth in the popular culture with this trash show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And of course, that's apparently imploded, and good riddance to that rubbish. Apparently that woman has to beat the shit out of her baby daddy, and he's not any better than she is. I mean, the reason he met her, as I understand it, is because they were swinging on their spouses, and it broke both their marriages up. So it's, Utah is full of white trash with money. And that white trash with money has a temple recommends, and they're just shitty human beings. And so in that context, it's not surprising that if you cheat on your spouse and you look at porn and you just generally be a shitty and unethical human being, you might rape somebody, you might sexually assault somebody, especially if you don't believe that rape is rape. Like, you believe that a 9-year-old girl can beguile a grown man and therefore she should bear some consequence or responsibility for her sexual assault at the hands of a 40 or 50-year-old man. Like, get the fuck out of here. I don't have any common ground with these people. There's no negotiating with these people. There's no persuading them. At the end of the day, this is going to be a brute force. You're going to have to decide. Those of you who are opposed to this, you're going to have to decide, like, how far you're going to take this. Like, you're going to have to decide, like, if you're actually going to put effort forth in immobilizing politically, in organizing socially to be effective. You're going to take your government back. You're going to stop giving your little 10% to the Church of Latter-day Saints that doesn't even enforce its own rules for abusers, people who rape kids. They might kick them out for a year or so, and they go to counseling at LDS social services, and they get rebaptized after a year's time. Like, that's the level here. That's what's going on in the state all the fucking time. You can go to Floodlit and you can read about hundreds of cases there. You can follow me or Justin Riggs or Jacob K. Johnson. And there's plenty of credible reports of abuse. It's not all sensationalist nonsense like some of the shit that's making it on the We Are the People Utah these days with their queer Christians. just like, what kind of fucking oxymoron is that? The fact that there are trans Latter-day Saints. There's actually transgender people who go to sacrament service, like men who are dressed as women, and the bishops don't kick them out. And because of guidance from Salt Lake, biological women now have to wait outside the restroom while some dude in a dress drops a deuce. They have to wait to relieve themselves because some dude in a dress thinks that he's a woman, and he's not, and he never will be, no matter the hormonal therapy he undergoes, the surgical augmentation. He will never be a woman, just like gay marriage will never be marriage. Because a real marriage is between a man and a woman who covenant to God. And if it ain't that case, even if it is an opposite sex marriage, if it omits God, it's not a marriage. It's just two people who went down to the courthouse and got a piece of paper. I got a marriage license. As though the state could ever sanctify an institution like marriage. And for you opposite sex secular couples out there, your marriage isn't worth the paper and ink it took to print that license on. It's not going to work. It's the reason over half of marriages fail is because God is the missing ingredient. If you don't pray with your spouse, if you don't discuss scripture with your spouse, if you aren't fulfilling the biblical role as a husband to your spouse, she isn't fulfilling the biblical role, and that is you're both staying in the lanes ordained by God, then guess what? You don't have a marriage. You have an imitation of a marriage. And I'm too old and too tired and too sick to mince words about it. The older I get, the more I realize that my father, who was hardcore about these issues and fundamentalist, he was right. Like, he was absolutely right about this. He was right about homosexuality. He was right about traditional marriage, which is the only type of marriage there is. He was right about a lot of things. And the older I get, the more I try to fight becoming my dad. The more I realize, my dad really wasn't that bad outside of the physical and mental and verbal abuse. He wasn't that fucking terrible. And honestly, I can't say that my dad ever beat my ass for nothing. If you really want to get down to it, I mean, I did give him a reason to discipline me. So we have DeCall Thomas. Thomas DeCall. Isaiah 30 says the high wall will crash suddenly and the vessel will shatter completely. Well, my personal favorite is Isaiah 59. That's my all-time favorite chapter in Isaiah. And I think it's relevant to the present discussion. Isaiah is a great book. I highly recommend those of you who actually read your Bibles. You should totally do a study of Isaiah. I mean, really, every time I read the book of Isaiah, I uncover more good stuff that I just didn't hit the first time, or the first 100 or so times that I read it. So, Isaiah 59, behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, neither his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear. And this is the devastating effect of sin. This is one of the things I don't understand about Latter-day Saints in Utah. Is you do understand the damage of sin is that it separates you from God. It's not that God his hand is shortened, or that he won't save you, or his ear, he can't hear you. It's that you sinned and you've alienated yourself from God, and you aren't repenting. You're clinging to your sin. You're calling your sin something other than sin. In the LMNOP community, that's part and parcel of what these people do. For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies, your tongue hath muttered perverseness. None calleth for justice, nor any pleadeth for truth. They trust in vanity and speak lies. They conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity. They hatch cockatrice eggs, that is, spiders' eggs, and weave the spider's web. For he that eateth of their eggs dieth, and that which is crushed breaketh out into a viper. Their web shall not become garments, neither shall they cover themselves with their works. Their works are works of iniquity, and the act of violence is in their hands. Their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity, wasting and destruction are in their paths. The way of peace they know not, and there is no judgment in their goings. They have made them crooked paths, and whosoever goeth therein shall not know peace. Therefore is judgment far from us, neither doth justice overtake us. We wait for light, but behold obscurity, for brightness, but we walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noon, day as in the night, and we are in desolate places as dead men. We roar all like bears, and mourn sore like doves. We look for judgment, but there is none, for salvation, but it is far off from us. For our transgressions are multiplied before thee, and our sins testify against us. For our transgressions are not with us, and our transgressions are with us. And as for our iniquities, we know them. In transgressing and lying against the Lord, and deserting and departing away from our God, and seeking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart, words of falsehood. And judgment is turned away backward. Justice stands for our oath. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. Yea, truth faileth, and he that departeth from evil maketh himself a prey. And the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment. If that doesn't describe modern day Utah and its social and political situation, I don't know what does. Your government doesn't represent you. Your government doesn't even follow the laws that it's supposed to enforce. You see that in your governor who forged signatures to qualify for the ballot. And I'm no Phil Lyman fan. I know things about Phil that aren't great. In fact, Phil's not that different from Spencer in that respect. But Phil was the legitimate Republican nominee. But here's the thing, everybody loves a winner and everybody hates a loser, and Phil went through the caucus system when everybody knows it's the signature gathering that's the real game. And Phil appealed to the base, the activist base of the Republican Party. And how many governors have recently won by appealing to that base? Oh, that's right. Fucking none. And so Phil operated in the world as it ought to be, as opposed to the world as it is. And so truth faileth, and he that departeth from evil maketh himself a prey, and the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment. Here's the thing we should all be wary of. Because when the Lord sees a certain level of corruption, he sees a lack of judgment, he sees that people who are trying to do good are prey to those who are doing evil, it displeases him, and he decides to do something about it. And he saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no intercessor, and therefore his arm brought salvation unto him, and his righteousness it sustained him. For he put on righteousness as a breastplate, and a helmet of salvation upon his head, And he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal as a cloak. According to their deeds, accordingly he will repay fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. To the islands he will repay recompense. There is no escape from God's justice. There is no escape from exposure for your deeds done in secret. And that's the problem that a lot of haters have with me over the past 4 years, is that their deeds done in darkness and in secret have been brought into light. And their reputations are so shitty, it doesn't matter how horrific these allegations are. The reality of it is, your reputation is so bad that your own neighbors and fellow community members find it plausible that you did what you're accused of. That you made kids drink piss and eat shit, and you raped newborns. I mean, there's an absolutely horrifying section in the Hamlin victim statements to describe what happened to Miriam Hamlin when she was brought home from the hospital, and how David Lee Hamlin's male friends in the Church of Satan, or the group as they called themselves, stood around this girl and digitally penetrated her, orally sodomized her, as part of her dedication to Lucifer. And when you read it and you think to yourself, okay, who the fuck is going to make that up? And you also, you realize your opposition is saying, oh, it's a false memory. It's an implanted memory. Hugh Allred and all these psychiatrists, they just implanted 500 pages or so of false memories. And you understand what the False Memory Syndrome Foundation is. It's founded by a man named Peter Frey, who was accused by his daughter Jennifer of molesting her as a kid. And so he and his wife, Pamela, who was also his step-sibling, apparently, why the fuck not? That's not weird as shit. So he marries his step-sibling, Pamela. They have a daughter named Jennifer, who's a psychology professor at the University of Oregon. And she privately alleges that her father sexually abused her as a kid. She's remembering the abuse. So she didn't publicize these allegations against Peter Frey, who was a math professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She didn't go public with it. She didn't try to gain anything by it. So Peter and Pamela decide they're going to form a foundation, and they're going to call it the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And they're going to have board members like Ralph Underweger and Helita Wakefield, who are given interviews to Pedica, a pedophile magazine in the Netherlands, in which Ralph Underweger says that pedophiles should boldly proclaim their pedophilia. It's a responsible choice to be a pedophile, and it's God's will for them to be pedophiles. That's who's on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. That's who they found, and that's who all these haters hang their hat on. They hang their hat on an organization where the board member was staffed by pedophiles or pedophile sympathizers. And Ralph Underweger was allowed to testify as an expert witness in hundreds of cases involving sexual abuse victims. And you wonder why barely a third of them come forward with their allegations? It's because they're going to have the indignity of some asshole like Ralph Underweger, who says responsibility is a pedophilia is a responsible choice, and it's God's will. They're going to have to sit in court and listen to that asshole spew that nonsense. And he's going to be the expert witness for the defense, their abuser. I mean, what the fuck is going on in this country? what has been going on in this country, because this has been going on since the 80s and 90s. You know, the LDS First Presidency acknowledged in June 1992 reports of ritual abuse and the reality of the phenomenon of ritual abuse. They did so in Inside Magazine. Like, and what choice did they have? I mean, I think Glenn Pace. There's the one memo that everybody knows about that was publicized, but it references two other reports that weren't publicized or leaked. And the church has kept that shit under wraps, just like the church keeps its finances under wraps from its members because they might not tithe if they know that their church has $250 billion in assets. So, what I would say to the Orthodox Latter-day Saints is, what the fuck are you defending here? Everything in this church is supposed to be done by common consent. Is that really what we have? I say we. I've left the church. I don't fucking believe in that institution anymore. But back when I was in it, like, one of the things that kind of troubled me towards the end was this idea of common consent. And how every vote where I'd been asked to sustain anything in wards and stakes, we all have that circumstance where we're sitting in our living room at a general conference with our friends, and we're watching general conference sessions, and some of us actually raise our hands to sustain things that are going in Salt Lake. Like, that's how ingrained it is. The vote has to be that fucking unanimous. And once you get out of that bubble or you start questioning it, oh, you're just an embittered ex-Mormon. You're just somebody who has a problem with the church, and, you know, you were never really Mormon to begin with because you didn't drink all the Kool-Aid and swallow it and keep it down. So you're not really a Mormon like the other Mormons, the real Mormons who just swallow whatever the living prophet and the apostles have to say, and they just go along to get along because their eternal destination and rank in the celestial kingdom depends on that. So if the prophet says to ignore or minimize sexual abuse, well, that's just what you're going to do because you don't want to lose your shot at exalted Godhead. So what's a little fucking child rape if it means that you rank a little higher in the celestial kingdom? That's the level. And of course, as long as you go along to get along and you're a good little Mormon, if you do slip up and fuck your kid or have an affair, as long as you aren't questioning the church's doctrine or history, they'll back you up. And you'll have a chip in the game. As long as you aren't controversial and you don't rock the boat. So it pays to look the other way when other people are sinning because they'll do the same for you. It's a quid pro quo. That's the level of what's going on to be a normalized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints right now. That's so all my haters who want to line up with that shit, you know, fuck off. You know, if that's what your rank in the celestial kingdom depends on, is looking the other way and validating and gaslighting victims, you're welcome to the celestial kingdom. Like, if all you have to do is sell your soul to rank a little higher in the celestial kingdom by denying abuse and invalidating or assigning culpability to a 9-year-old girl for beguiling a man, get the fuck out of here. Like, those of us who are trying to do the right thing, however imperfect we are, It is as Isaiah 59 says, truth fails in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Truth fails when it comes to people who are trying to tell the truth about the church's history and the evolution of its doctrines and where those doctrines originated. Those who depart from evil, who call out abuse and call out institutional policies that aid and abet abuse, they make themselves a prey, because guess what? They're gonna face disfellowship or excommunication if they don't shut the fuck up. The church expends more effort crushing dissent from people about its history or where its doctrines come from, or people who publicize sexual abuse and people who report sexual abuse to outside authorities than it does dealing with people who actually rape kids. Man, that's the fucking reality. So, if you want to shit on me for opposing this and saying that it's all satanic panic and everything else, well, you're free to do that. That's not going to have any effect on me at all. But what you should have a problem with is how many victims. You can hate me all you want. It's going to affect those people who have already been through enough in terms of their sexual abuse. When somebody like you lumps him in with me because you don't like me and you don't like the fact that I'm, publicizing, exposing this, and substantiating it with actual court documents and primary source documents to show that David Lee Hamlin has been found by clear and convincing evidence in a court of law that he sexually abuses daughters, that he was recorded on a line saying, "I am sorry for raping you," by the Provo Police Department. But hey, it's all bullshit. This is a guy who admitted to the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing that he was having sex with his therapy patients and trying to convince them that it was part of their therapy. His brother-in-law is a convicted sex offender, or at least he was. Tim Tuttle's dead of throat cancer. There's Sterling Van Wagenen, Hamlin's ex-cousin-in-law. He's in prison right now for sexually abusing a girl. He also sexually abused at least one other victim that we know of that was male. He admitted to the police that he did it, and the police didn't prosecute and convicted him, even with a fucking confession. Because the victim's not going to testify. Well, no shit. Why would he in this state? Why would he voluntarily step into that meat grinder and be put through all of that? Because here's the thing, the burden in this state is any accuser has to be fucking perfect. They have to be spotless and without blemish. And any abuser, they are forgiven all of their sins and trespasses. Everything is contextualized and excused for them. Even after they're convicted, found guilty by a jury of their peers. Who do you think the Ward family shows up for at the sentencing hearing? Their victim or the abuser who's facing prison time? What do you think the letters roll in for? You think the letters roll in for that child that he raped? Or do you think the letters roll in talking about what a great guy he was? And yeah, he might have fucked a kid, but other than that, he's a fantastic human being. That's the fucking level, And the thing of it is what's really wonderful about it is when people who are your brothers at arms in this fight, at least ostensibly, people like Jason Preston, go on Ward Radio and talk about, he does things his way and I do things my way. What? I do things with receipts And you have people like this River chick, the queer Christian. I want to talk about crucifixions at the state capitol with no documentation or source material whatsoever. You platform that shit. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to broaden your audience to include the LMNOP people, many of whom were subjected to sexual abuse as children, and you want to be inclusive. You want to build a broad coalition. You want to tell them it's okay to be gay. Or we could just overlook that. We can just overlook the fact that a significant portion of why you are a gay adult is the fact that during your formative years, someone of the same sex abused you and exploited you and normalized that kind of behavior for you and fucked you up. Like cognitively and sexually and spiritually. So now you're attracted to somebody of the same sex. And if you're lesbian, maybe the males in your life were horrifyingly abusive, physically and otherwise. And as a result, you don't want anything to do with the man. And you think you're going to get into a relationship with a woman and it's going to be different. And then you run headlong into the wall of reality that lesbians have a higher incidence rate of domestic abuse than just about every other demographic out there. Like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's not that I don't sympathize with people in those communities. I think they don't happen in a vacuum. And when you see someone coming out of the closet as a teenager or as a young adult, you don't need to look at them. You don't need to criticize them. You need to look at their parents. You need to look at the adults that were there in their lives and like which one of them caused this, because it is caused by abuse. Like the reason they choose this is because it was normalized for them by an abusive adult. I would say I'd die on this hill, but I'm not going to die because none of these limp-wristed people are going to do shit to me, because I'm not a little kid that they can sodomize and abuse. I'm a grown man. You know, they can't do shit to me. They can piss off in the comments and they can hate from afar, and they can go in the Kimberly Watson Smith's group, the little LDS Energy Healing Code Exposed. I don't even know what the fucking energy code is. And I don't give a shit. I'm not going to Google that. I have a life. Like, that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. I guess it's Mormons who are part of all that bullshit. Reiki or whatever it is. Touch energy and all. Like, this is the whole thing. If you were the restored church and you had this spiritual discernment, you wouldn't be susceptible to that bullshit. But you are. Because you don't have any spiritual discernment. You don't have any wisdom. You just latch on to every little thing that fucking comes along. And your church keeps you in an infantile state to where you can't think critically. And it's fine, you know, you can follow the come follow me guide that they give you, that spoon feeds you the most elemental or elementary teachings of the church, and you'll never grow beyond that. You'll just be a homer for whatever the living prophet or the living apostles say, without considering that, you know, doesn't current revelation bear some obligation to conform to prior revelation, or at least be consistent? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Absolutely not. In today's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they just make it up as they go along. And why not? A significant number of the quorum of the 12 members and First Presidency members have dozens of allegations of abuse against them. Or there are people like Patrick Kieran who are part of the care team to restore some teenage sexual predator like Peyton Bussey to good standing in the church. And then Peyton Bussey grows into adulthood and comes out that he was sexually abusing his own nephew, as well as at least one other child in the state of Washington. And he's got a federal case for child sexual abuse material, which includes a fetish for like gay father-son porn. Because, that shouldn't cause his father, Phil, to come under any scrutiny. Surely there's no reason why Peyton would have that kind of a kink. No fucking reason whatsoever. Yeah, the fact that his mom was born and raised in a town like Mount Pleasant, which is part of Sanpete County. It's where alleged members of the Church of Satan were located, like George Wilford Johansson, who, by the way, has a conviction for sexually abusing one of his employees. He was a stake president of all things. His nephew is a convicted sex offender. Oh, that's right. George is in the Hamlin victims. So there's another guy who has this kind of shit. An actual conviction. He admitted to what he did. He was convicted. And then his nephew, obviously. Because I'm sure it's just a huge coincidence. I'm sure it's an innocent coincidence. But hey, I do things my way, and Jason Preston does things his way. So I actually go out and find this documentation. I put it on investigationsofritualabuse.com, the court documents, and so on and so forth. I actually do research. Justin Riggs does research. We don't just take people at their word when they make the worst possible accusation that you could make against somebody. Like, we go out and we find either corroboration for it or we debunk it. And that's what investigative researchers do. That's what people who are credible in this field do. We don't put queer Christians on our podcast. And we don't put people on the podcast who don't have any receipts whatsoever to substantiate what they're saying. Or the receipts they do have do not necessarily lead one to conclude that what this person is saying follows from the evidence. That's not what we do. But of course, I have 698 subscribers. If I were to pull up We Are the People Utah, they've got probably over 10,000. Because if you do this right, it takes time to build that kind of a following. You're not telling people what they want to hear. You're not telling them the most sensational things imaginable, like crucifixions at the state capitol and all this other shit. Like, you're telling them things that are plausible, and then you're spelling out why it's plausible from the evidence. And of course, your point in doing so, and the reason you make your Substack and all of this information freely available, is because you want as many people as possible to see it and to make up their own minds. And then you got to deal with assholes, probably assholes within this Hamlin group, going to your Substack and filing 30 spurious copyright complaints against you because you have photographs of some of their art that they're publicly selling online. And you talk about how that art is atypical for a Latter-day Saint artist, and like what the subject matter it examines, death, in the way that it examines it in the context of the abuse allegations against them. And that's the reason you have to put up a paywall is because these assholes come to your Substack and they just file one bullshit copyright complaint after another. And as a result, you can only leave the paywall open for like 24 hours. That seems to be the tipping point, because a lot of times they don't catch things in those articles in 24 hours. And you give out free subscriptions to anybody who, just goes and likes or subscribes to your YouTube channel. Clearly, you're not looking to get rich. On top of it, all your source documents are available for anybody who wants to see them. All the court documents that you paid money for on Exchange or Pacer, all those documents, you put them for other people to see. And then you got to deal with your haters on social media talking about how you do it to get rich, or how you do it for financial gain or anything. And believe me, if I wanted to put everything behind a paywall right off of the bat, just give a little teaser paragraph like some Substack creators, I could. But the goal has never been to get rich. The only reason I have a paywall up at all is so that I don't have to wade through and refute 30 individual complaints, copyright complaints to Substack. I don't have to continually go through those appeals. That's the level of what you deal with here. And then you deal with somebody that you've given your research and your receipts to, and you've helped them build their platform and their message in this. They go on a public podcast like Word Radio and shit on you like you did something wrong. They do things their way and you do things your way. And you didn't do anything wrong. And you find out that that person is telling people the reason they're facing a defamation suit is because of you. Well, he's been fundraising off of that damn suit for over a year now. And he hasn't noticed either of the Binions, Joe and Lee Binion. He hasn't noticed either one of them for a deposition, but I've been noticed for a deposition. Like his attorney, funded by his donors, didn't file any motion in opposition to the subpoena Ducis Tessum, compelling me to turn over documents that are clearly privileged. Documents and identities of sources. His attorney didn't file anything in opposition to that. Because at the end of the day, Jason Preston has always wanted those documents out in the public domain. He's always wanted those identities out in the public domain without any regard for danger to sources or like what they're facing in terms of their security. He doesn't give a shit. Just like he didn't give a shit about me. He didn't give a shit about me when he went on Ward Radio and dumped on me. Talking about he does things differently. Yeah, we all know you do things differently. And that's fine. I was fine with that until I was sandbagged and my wife was sandbagged. At the end of the day, he wants to be out front and he's welcome to it. My goal was to leave and to turn it over to other people. And I thought to some extent that would be him. I thought it would be him and his little researcher. I don't know if he still is a researcher, Wolf Hunter. But then I find out from a third party that they're going to do a film with my material on ritual abuse. And they're going to cut me out of it. They're going to have a Lauren Conlon in. And that's fine. Lauren's attractive. She's a true crime person out of New York who does a lot of stuff on YouTube. She's far prettier than I'll ever be. And had they been up front with me as opposed to trying to sneak around behind my back to do it, I wouldn't have had an issue. I laughed about it initially when I found out about it because some sizzle reel was dropped in my Facebook direct message. And that was the first I ever heard about it. It had been going on for months. And so, because I'm a direct person, I texted him directly about it. We had a conversation because he was, he knew I was developing a film about it called Four Little Girls. I'd written a script. And I potentially had a funder for it. My wife was doing a ritual abuse. Um, a ritual abuse film was Survivors for her organization. Chapter 85 would like me to know that the audio is complete garbage, and maybe it is. Who knows? I am currently in a state, and it is like almost 11 o'clock. And at the end of the day, this is around the time when bandwidth becomes a precious resource because so many priesthood holders in the state of Utah are either online looking for women to swing with or cheat on their wives with, or they're like downloading porn or streaming porn. So, Chapster, I'm fucking sorry that the audio is complete garbage in your opinion. Maybe take it up with the priesthood porn holders or the priesthood porn watchers, because that's usually the problem. I am the Axeman would like me to know that Chapster 85 is probably just a hater, and my audio is fine. It's always a possibility that who would think that somebody in Utah would lie or be a hater in my comments. So Chapster 85 said just need more volume. L can barely hear you. Well, maybe turn up your volume, because my audio bars are in the yellow. And I've got my sensitivity on my mic all the way up. And granted, my sister has a nickname for me. She calls me Mumblefuck, which should give you an idea of the dynamic of our relationship. She says that I mumble too much, that I don't project or enunciate enough, so she has taken to calling me Mumblefuck. I would apologize for the foul language, but it is what it is. And over the past few months, with the significant health issues that I've had, I'm sorry, I don't care. Hold on. I gotta say, beer is, and I don't know if this is an apocryphal quote or not, Ben Franklin purportedly said that beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Probably one of the few things I agree with Ben on, given that he was a member of the Hellfire Club and a serial adulterer who spread his seed throughout the continent of Europe as a diplomat. That was one of the things he was known for. So I probably only agree with Ben on the issue of beer being proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. It's not alcoholic beer, for those of you who are new to the podcast. I do not drink alcohol. I don't know that I ever will again. It's just not conducive to my optimum lifestyle. But then again, few things are. Rachel Christensen said the reason We Are the People Utah started getting so many followers was because of the Shadows of Power series. You did that. I see you, Goel. I didn't even know what Substack was. Joined for your work. Well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. At the end of the day, to some degree when it came to this topic or subject. Yeah, I mean, the introduction that most people had, um, I prefer mumblefuck over potato nigger. That would be a cult Karen. Um, you know, potato nigger did make me laugh a lot. Uh, I suppose it was a shot at Irish descent. But here's the thing about people of Irish descent: we can suffer all day and never complain. Is what it is. And I got to say, there is just nothing like a cold beer at the end of a long day. And it has been a long day. The highlight of the day was I took my wife for ice cream after we dropped off stuff at the Deseret Industries. Or attempted to drop stuff off at the DI. We're about to move, so my wife is downsizing some of her excess clothing and whatnot. Which, after almost 2 years of marriage, my wife has gained about 20 pounds. Because I personally don't believe that an ass can be big enough. So I've diligently fed my wife, who was a very petite woman when we first got married, and my wife is stacked, and it's awesome. So her weakness is sugar. So every chance I get, I take her for stuff like ice cream and frozen yogurt. And she just gets more thick and more luscious and just, oh. Which is the way it's supposed to be in marriage, and it would be in most marriages in Utah if the men weren't fucking gay and more inclined to look at porn as opposed to spending time with their wife or their kids. Maybe a lot of your social ills would disappear. I don't know. It seems obvious to me. And maybe if fathers weren't giving their daughters marriage lessons, the state wouldn't be so fucked up. But it is. And at the end of the day, all the haters who have a problem with what I'm saying, well, you're welcome to do something about it. You're not busting a grape in a food fight. Because I'm not some 12-year-old kid or some prepubescent that you can bully and push around. You know, you might be able to hassle me at times through the legal system with some bullshit stalking injunction for somebody I've never met or communicated with, you know. Outside of a comment when you restack my content. Well, Mormon Stories, it's John DeLynn. The Mormon Stories also did a 3-part series that was essentially aimed at debunking SRA. Disappointing. It was about what I'd expect from John DeLynn. He is an apostate. He is a heretic. As they said in the movie Full Metal Jacket, I didn't know they stacked shit that high. And that's been my impression of John DeLynn since I became aware of him. I didn't know they stacked shit that high. You know, he's got a nice grift going. And more power to him. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to hear that SRA is false. And it's just a satanic panic. And a lot of people who want to hear that want to hear it because they're involved in it or because they want to minimize sexual abuse. And that's what this state is. It's gaslighting victims. It's invalidating what they say every chance that you get. That's the reality of it. So when Mormon Stories or Ward Radio does a multi-part series aimed at debunking SRA, here's the thing. more people believe in it at the end than believed in it at the beginning. So I want John DeLynn to do as many series on SRA as possible. I want Jonah Barnes to do as many series um, about SRA as possible. Because when your enemy is destroying themselves, why fucking get in the way? Rachel Christensen would like me to know that Reed's extra ginger beer is so good. Yeah, I prefer, regular tasting beers as opposed to beers that have extra flavors in them. So back when I drank, I was a big, if I was going to drink a shitty American beer, I drank like regular Coors, which is what I'm drinking now, at least the non-alcoholic version of it. Um, didn't really like Coors Light, but regular Coors was alright. Miller Genuine Draft was alright. Pabst Blue Ribbon, if you're in a budgetary crunch, PBR is a mainstay. And if they made a non-alcoholic PBR, I'd proudly drink it. But they don't, at least that I've seen. And then, of course, the old mainstay, Guinness. If you have Guinness with Harp Lager and you pour the Guinness over a spoon, you know what you're doing. You make a good half and half beer, and it is tasty. When I was in college, I came across Shiner Bock. That's another good one. It was, you could get Shiner Bock at this place called Barnstormer's Pizza where I went to college for like $5 a pitcher. And that was a steal of a deal. So many rounds at Barnstormer's Pizza. Rest in peace, Barnstormers. Adam was one of the best bartenders I ever had, and I kept him in business. Who is this Chokma guy on Twitter that is constantly defending Gordon Bowen? Well, I tend to believe he's probably Gordon. He does seem a little invested in defending an indefensible guy. And not many of Gordon's personal associates or friends want to defend him. So the only person I know that wants to say anything good about Gordon is Gordon. So I don't know who he is. But the thought has crossed my mind that it's Gordon trying to tie Justin Riggs and others up in endless debates. No, I mean, it's so much of this state is just bullshit theater. It's people with sock accounts trying to stir up drama and whatnot. They have multiple social media accounts, and when you block one, they try to pop up under another and try to bait you into saying or doing outrageous shit, so that they're gonna turn around and like, oh, you're inappropriate. You threaten me. It's a bunch of bitches. Like, most men don't thrive on drama, and they kick it out of their lives. Like real men, like you shut that shit down as soon as it comes across. No, I'm fine with Justin of LDS abuse. Like, I want that to be perfectly clear. We Are the People Utah and Jason Preston went on Ward Radio. And I don't know why he had to mention me. I don't know why he had to say anything else about me. I didn't know why he had to say shit about me behind my back about how I was causing him to get sued for defamation. See, the thing is, when you tell the truth, there's no ground for defamation. I'm sorry that he hired an attorney who went to a hearing and shit the bed, and he spent he told me he spent $80,000 on Frank Mylar. And then Frank apparently, when he was arguing the motion to dismiss, showed up to court and was completely unprepared and got his ass handed to him. That's almost the universal impression by everybody who was there. And so he got his check. He got a reported 80 grand according to Jason. And then Jason had to go shit on me, and Jason was upset with me behind the scenes because I wouldn't give him, at the time, the 98 victims I had, dozens of whom had identified the people he's in the defamation case with as their abusers, or as being present during their abuse, during some of these little Indian religious ceremonies where peyote was being passed around in sweat lodges. By the way, that those particular allegations fit within the context of the Hamlin victim statements, because the Hamlin sisters say that they were sexually abused in sweat lodges after being drugged with peyote. So he was telling people behind my back I was the reason that he was getting sued for defamation. He needed to distance himself from me. That's what he said. And I just kind of rolled my eyes. It is what it is. I viewed him as being on my side on this issue and being on the side of victims at that point. But apparently, I'm not as smooth and diplomatic as he is. And I say things that, offend people. I'm anti-gay and homophobic and all this other nonsense. And it's like, well, Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20 are pretty fucking anti-gay. It's not that I'm anti-gay. It's, I've known and socialized and fraternized with a number of friends of mine over the years who are gay. But you get tired of going to their funerals. Well, Chapster, have I ever spoken to any of the Hamlin daughters? No. They've been pretty quiet. I have reached out to them at varying points in this to ask them to interview with me, and they choose not to. In terms of how they're doing, that's a mixed bag from what I can tell from a distance. Kate Baxter's film companies are apparently in financial trouble based on her filings in the United Kingdom. They're illiquid. I had significant questions about where she got the money to start 555 Films. And the films that she was putting on her 555 Films website, I didn't see how they were turning a profit or how they would turn a profit. So I had questions about that. In looking at the property records of some of the people named in those victim statements, what I noticed were repeated, like, refinancing of the property, which in my experience is a sign that some financial malfeasance is afoot. Sometimes it can mean good old-fashioned, like, laundering of money. And other times it can mean that someone is being blackmailed or extorted, because they're constantly trying to, like, cash out their liquidity or equity in any assets that they have in order to pay off the person who is exploiting or extorting or blackmailing them. However, there was never anything definite about that, and of course some of the people, all of them, didn't want to talk about it. They didn't deny it when I breached the subject with them over the phone. They didn't want to talk about it, and they didn't want to interview. Um, you try to give people an opportunity to comment when you're doing stories that name them. And by and large, I did try to do that early on. And those people universally would get hysterical on the phone. And if you know me, I don't do the hysteria. My siblings know that. Like, a good way to get me to check out of a conversation is to become hysterical. I just think it's ridiculous. Now, like, I don't argue with people. Like, I make my decision, and if you don't like it, you can leave. But I don't argue. And that's best policy that was evolved over the course of my 20s and 2 marriages before my present lifelong commitment to my wife in Christ, to Hot Cindy. She is lovely, and I should have not gotten married before her. Shouldn't have got married to any woman who didn't have a relationship with God or Christ, but to be fair, I didn't have much of a relationship with him. And nobody held a gun to my head and made me marry those 2 women. This is 2 one-night stands that took up 10 years of my life. That's what it is. Have you ever received any death threats or felt concern for your safety? Yeah, I've received some death threats here and there. Random shit. Did I feel concerned for my safety? No. Somebody who's serious about killing you is not gonna, advertise in advance. They're just gonna take a shot at you. So when someone makes these threats and they want to posture and they want to talk in advance of what they say they're going to do to you, it's a very good sign that they're not going to do shit. On top of it, like, I am very proficient with a pistol and a rifle. I love to shoot. Before recent rounds with health scares, I used to go to the gun range quite frequently. But a lot of my money is going to medical things right now. And trying to prolong my life and keep my quality of life such that, I'm not an invalid. But I got a lot of miles on my body, so we'll see. Like, it is what it is. I'm 48. I'm old and busted. Like, at the same time, I've always been at my most comfortable in a fight. The adrenaline stuff that other people talk about, like freezing up, and that because my dad made me spar with him as a kid, I'm not really affected by that. Because I hit mitts and heavy bags and that sort of thing. It's just kind of second nature to me to do that. And the average person is not going to have the skill set to get into it with me and do anything. So a lot of these people are very average, and they, outside of intimidating or threatening kids, they suck. Like, you can physically dominate a kid, but a grown man who fights back, that's a different story, especially when that grown man's always carrying. Um, so, like I said, I'll go looking for trouble. If I had people threaten me in the Hamlet case, sure. Is it resulted in me being like concerned about my safety? No. That's why I answered that asshole's like questions about my daughter and her age and everything. Is because I'm not ultimately concerned that these people are going to do anything to my daughter, because if they did, that would be a catastrophic mistake for them. Um, it's not that I'm the biggest or the baddest, but I do have a will. So if you fuck with me, like, I fuck with you back. Do I catch flack from people at your church for the work that you do? I don't really talk to people at my church about much to do with the work that I do, and I have a day job. Um, I have several gigs that I make money at. If people ask a question about the kind of work I do, that's one thing. I'll give them kind of a generic overview of it. I strongly believe that people know what they need to know. And a lot of people don't need to know the ins and outs of what I do for work or anything about my life. Um, I value my wife's opinion and insight. I value my brother's opinion and insight. My sister and my brother and sister both know that I've done unconventional things for a living my entire life, and they know about this. And they veer between being intrigued and just not wanting to know. Um, so, to some degree, some people are turned off by it. Flack is something that you really can't give somebody like me. I am pathologically incapable of giving a fuck, and always have been throughout my life, which is something that really annoys a lot of people. They really want to have an effect on you, and it just it's never registered with me. So, Chapster, thanks for answering all my questions. Much appreciated. You're welcome. I've tried to be a little bit more um, forward on these live streams and talk about things. I did initially want to be a little less me, I guess. And because, I was aiming at Latter-day Saints, and at the time I really didn't have anything against Latter-day Saints. I loved being a Latter-day Saint. I thought that was the tits. Um, and in Texas and Florida, it was. I mean, it was great people. Um, I have nothing but positive things to say about the people who baptized me, like the missionary who baptized me. Great guy, Mitchell. Um, like the people in my first couple of wards in Texas, fabulous people. Um, some of the best people I'd ever met in my life. Just really good human beings. Shout out to Zach and Genevieve, Sonny and Malia, Bishop Townsend, who will always, in my mind, will always be my bishop. I'm not a Latter-day Saint anymore. Like, that's a quality human being, and it's unfortunate that Utah Saints are assholes. Like, in a lot of cases, because that's not the way Saints are outside of Utah. Um, And I don't want anybody to have the impression that Latter-day Saints in Texas or Florida are as infested with this ritual abuse or the sexual abuse stuff. I would leave my daughter alone with those people in those wards and stakes in a second. Like I totally trust them around my kid, and they're good people. Um, like I shared a lot of values with them, and I bore witness with them. And then when I came out to Utah, first for work and then to live part time, uh, it got old quick. Like they have kind of a smarmy attitude that I really didn't like. And the sad part was there were a number of them that I'd met who were like the people that I came up with as a convert. I mean, there are people out there like Dan Bulkley, I think his name is, and others who just great people like the Griffiths, the guy who killed Joseph Smith. I had nothing but good things to say about him. Always pleasant and personable. Third Ferguson, one of my favorite people. That's the alias he goes by on Facebook. I swap beans with him all the time. Been talking about some things with him recently that touch on this. Um, like Jacob Isbell. He left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to go to kind of this offshoot, the Church of Jesus Christ. And Jacob Isbell is like one of the nicest people I've ever met. Um, and what really made me love him was he was in a grappling match with Jacob Hansen of Thoughtful Saints. And he put an Ezekiel choke on Hansen and made him tap out. Like, Hansen's a prick. I don't like that guy. And I was really happy and proud of Jacob Isbell for choking him. Um, like, have you heard of the cop in Idaho that admitted to SRA with his kids? I don't think that I have off the top of my head. Um, I don't. There's a lot of high strangeness in Idaho, Nevada, Colorado, and Arizona that I'm familiar with, and it appears that there are pockets of it in California, Oregon, and Washington. And I don't understand how aggressively normal people like Saints. They're aggressively normal in every other state that I've been in. But they're weird as shit in the states that I just mentioned. A significant portion of them are. And I don't like it. I don't have words for it. I don't bear witness with it. Um, there are people that I like who I don't agree with on certain things. Like there's a guy named Ken Krog, and Ken's a really nice person. Um, Always supportive of IRA in its initial times and everything, and then come to find out that Ken is tied in deep with Tim Ballard, who I don't agree with or like at all. Uh, Tim, what he did was adultery, and I feel bad for his wife and his kids. Like I can't imagine having your father put out there like that. And that's the thing that people like that don't consider is the effect that their acts are going to have on the people close to him. Like apparently his wife has forgiven him for it. I don't know what his relationship with his kids are. I hope it's good, but I don't see how he can speak to his kids with any credibility after what came out about him. And there's some stuff I'm aware of from his time with OUR that is not great. Some allegations by ex-OUR employees and some allegations by victims against him. Not the victim like Celeste Bores or any of that. I don't believe Tim raped any of the women that he's been embroiled with litigation with. I think these were consenting adults he knew that they shouldn't be in those situations. And consequently, I don't have a lot of sympathy for anybody who's involved. Like, if you're a husband, you're supposed to be focused on your wife and kids, and if you're a wife and a mom, you're supposed to be focused on your husband and your kids. And to the extent that you have to work as a woman to support your family, I get it. You know, it takes a lot of money to stay afloat in today's world, in today's economy. Especially with gas being almost $5 a gallon because of this Iran shit. But ultimately, if God provides for you, I don't think women should work outside of the home, not because they're less than men. Because I do believe that I don't put financial stress on my wife. Like, it's my job to pay the bills, and it's is what it is. I mean, my job is to work and make money and provide for her, and she can stay at home and be in her feminine energy. That's what the kids call it nowadays, and not be stressed out about money or finances. Thank God, God provides that for me. Yeah, He provides opportunities for me to earn. But, like, so, difficult research. I believe that's Kresha K. Easton. Kind of important if you're regarded as a credible journalist and forensic psychologist, but then actively gatekeeping. Tom Harrison's son was best friends forever, or BFFs, with her recently deceased brother, James Johnson. I don't know who that is. Like, I don't like Tom. Like, he shows up in all the wrong places. Tim Ballard pays himself $600,000 a year. I'm not surprised. I keep waiting on somebody to pay me enough money to sell out. But they don't. Like, I keep waiting for somebody to show up with enough money for me to even be tempted, but they never do. And having a soul is kind of a financial handicap. Like, I get it. Tim Ballard pays himself $600,000 a year. Good for Tim. Like, I don't know what good it's going to do him in eternity, but good for him. He got $600,000 a year to give himself. Go for it. Like, his life is shit. I don't see him ever having really, like, wide credibility or traction. I certainly don't see him becoming a prophet of the church or a U.S. senator or president after everything that happened with him. But if he wants to get high on his own supply and pay himself a bunch of money in the process, I can't. Tim is what I expect of Latter-day Saints at this point. He's a grifter. And grift is something like, I mean, Utah is the fraud capital of the world in the country. Like, multi-level marketing companies and shit. Um, so, Lauren of Hidden True Crime, who reports on all Mormon-related crimes, was in the same ward as Dick and Britta Miles. Tom too, yet she reported on Tom and Tim only to a certain point, then nothing. I can't speak to what Lauren reports or doesn't report. Um, all I can say is Tim seems to be unhappy, and he seems to think that the church was in the wrong for excommunicating him. But if you're naked with a woman other than your wife, pantomiming sex or whatever, that is adultery, and you didn't need to have the couples ruse for any of that shit you were doing. That's the biggest crock of shit ever. Um, you know, but hey, he's making 600 grand a year doing that shit, sponging off of people like Krog and God knows who else. Anybody who believes his bullshit, he's going on jumps, which is basically he's selling. Uh, he's selling a little jaunt down in South and Central America, um, and it's an excuse for endowed Mormon priesthood holders to go to bars and clubs for the children because they're on a jump and they're fighting sex trafficking. And it's like, no, you're not. This is your loophole to drink and, hang around with whores. You're comparing her reporting on the Summer Roney case versus your reporting. The two are polar opposite, in my opinion. Well, that's usually the case. I don't know. I guess you're talking about Lauren Conlon or whatever her name is. It's what it's par for the course. You know, my entire life I've been tutoring cheerleaders and attractive women and like watching them steal shit from other people and get away with it because they're pretty. Life is different and the rules are different for pretty people. Um, that's part of it. The fact of the matter is they'll never be as good at things because they don't have to work as hard. Um, so they don't struggle as much, so they never really kind of get sharpened and like honed to be part of this on any level. And so they're always lacking. So I don't consider those people to be my competition other than the fact that I got replaced in a theoretical film by her that Preston was going to do on ritual abuse. He said it wasn't going to be in the Hamlin case. That was the filmmaker's idea to do that sizzle reel. But David Lee Hamlin was on the sizzle reel, and he was the centerpiece of it. And they didn't tell me they were going to do that. I found out about it from the person who did the sizzle reel. So, great, go behind my back and do shit. Tell people I'm responsible for your defamation case and why I'm the reason you're getting sued. Shit on my wife. Somehow it was my responsibility when I was really sick that these people were saying that his wife Alexia was a transgender person which was bullshit, and I'm supposed to do something to shut it down, and I came up out of a bed and dealt with it and put a stop to it as best I could. And I want to specify, like, my issue with Jason does not extend to his wife. Like, his wife's one of the nicest people ever. I don't think she had anything to do with any of this. I think Jason does what Jason wants to do, and it is what it is. He benefited from my work product, and he catapulted himself into the forefront of this. The problem is, after victims go on a show and they tell their stories, they get to deal with the repercussions of it after the fact. And he just has their content, he has their story, and that's the end of it. He's not there with them in the aftermath. Like, at the end of the day, that's what you're dealing with here, and it's your choice. As far as like the rest of it, David Lee Hamlin is the douchiest of all douche. He's a douche canoe, dude. Several things that I hate are like white people with dreadlocks, white people who think that they're a different race or ethnicity and they imitate that race or ethnicity. And for David Lee Hamlin, he's imitating kind of this stereotype of the beatific Indian who's connected to Mother Earth in the divine feminine and all this other like breathless shit that these people talk about. So at the end of the day, that's David Lee Hamlin. He's always imitating something that he could never be. And David Lee Hamlin's not a medicine man. He's not a Native American. He's not an Indian. He's an impersonator. He's a culture vulture. That's all he's ever going to be. Because he hates the fact that he's a white man. Like, that's what God made him to be is not good enough. And so consequently, he latched onto this Native American nonsense and started to imitate it, and that's all it is. It's a pale imitation of the real thing. Same thing with James Warren, Flaming Eagle Mooney. He's not Native American. So you have these people who want to latch on to Native Americans and their religion and their culture and the things that were done to Native Americans throughout their history. Like, I know Joe Binion stands up in like fast and testimony meetings and talks about how white people stole the Native Americans' lands. And, well, you're stealing their culture, you and your friends, and that's kind of the issue, is that you're just some white dude from Spring City, and David Lee Hamlin is some white dude from Provo, or, he was born, I think, in Michigan, and you guys are stealing an entire culture. You dress up and you play Indian and all this other stuff, and it's really silly. Whoa, Krisha was here? Crusher was here? I leave at the worst times. Well, Axeman, this is why you don't leave my live stream. It attracts all the finest people. You never know who's going to show up. So, yeah, it's white people with dreadlocks and white people who are culture vultures. And it's not that I'm like politically correct or anything, or that I extol the virtues of Native American civilization and culture. Like, I believe cultures clash, and certain cultures win and certain cultures lose. And, as much as I might not agree with some of the things that that were done to Native Americans, which are atrocious. History is brutal. And certain civilizations win and others lose. Absolute way to determine which culture is superior in terms of force and deploying force and atrocity. And white people are just uniquely good at violence. Like, they're very good at overcoming cultures that they encounter with violence and force. And it's just, that's the way the world runs. At the end of the day, it wasn't like Indians were pacifist or that they weren't committing atrocities on each other. Like, the thing about human beings is that they're all possessed of the capacity to be fucking terrible to each other and to do atrocious things to each other. And that's what happened here. You know, that's what happened in our country's history, and the clash between European civilizations and Native American civilizations. It was just ugly. And is what it is, whether you want to like it or not. Doesn't change the fact that European civilizations won in that clash. And, you know, you have these self-hating white people who want to performatively wring their hands after the fact about everything that happened to Native Americans. And, you know, how white people stole their land, and it's this collectivization of guilt. And that's what Hamlin and his little group do. They do it across the board, you know, because they're virtue signaling, and when you virtue signal, it's because you don't have any virtue. It's just a performative gesture on your part. And so a lot of these people are really shallow. Combined with the shallowness and the superficiality is like this obsession with sex as power. Like manipulating and exercising dominion over people sexually, with or without their consent. Like, that's who these people are. They're fuck ups. Like, none of them are really in the Latter-day Saint mainstream. Even Gordon Bowen, he's always on the fringe. Like, he's never in the inner circle. He's a useful outcast who's willing to do whatever he's tasked with by people who are on the inner circle, but no amount of performance on his part, no amount of merit on his part is going to earn him entry into that inner circle. He will always be a little gay freak, and he will always be on the outskirts of the club that he has clearly so desperately wanted to be involved in his entire life. And that's a lot of these people. They're on the outside looking in. And so what they decide to do, oh, we're going to be Satanists. We're going to be Latter-day Satanists. We're going to be, like, infiltrating the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we're going to be ritual abusers. We're going to be Satanists. It is fucking stupid. But it is what they chose. Goel, and you're reporting on Hamlin. I noticed they had a system using red and black dots to indicate whether they deemed other people as righteous or not. I believe, if I recall correctly, the victim statement outlined that in relation to people's place in, like, the afterlife. That they had people ministering to people in the celestial and terrestrial kingdom to bring them to Lucifer's armies. So the ordinances that they performed um, in their homes or in LDS temples after hours. Those ordinances, while temporal, had an eternal effect. So they were actively proselytizing both in this life and in the afterlife for Lucifer's forces. So I don't know what Chad's ranking system is. One of the things about Latter-day Saints and the sects that form out of the Latter-day Saint mainstream is that they seem to be obsessed with rank. I mean, the Kingstons have like their numbering system. Each man is assigned a number that indicates their place in the hierarchy. I guess Chad Daybell had a ranking system. In terms of the Church of Satan, it appears that their callings were kind of their indication of rank in their council system. And late to the chat, GSAG-J3Q. I strongly oppose sexual, emotional, physical, and mental abuse of any kind. Well, good. You're in good company for the most part, except for the haters who are hovering in the chat who have yet to jump in. So Lori's brother Alex Cox sounds similar to who you're talking about. I don't know. Lori Vallow Daybell. Daybell was allegedly in possession of the Book of Life, whatever, if that's the literal Book of Life, where the names of everyone in eternity, I don't see where that would be possible. Must be a different Book of Life. So I believe as a source of his ranking system, he ranked my entire bloodline, which is deeply disturbing to me. Well, it ought to be, given how people who are ranked by Chad Daybell tend to end up dead. Guy's a nutcase. And the thing of it is, there's plenty of apocalyptic Mormons who believe all that weird shit. And they do heinous, god-awful things as a result of those beliefs. Like, Mormon eschatology is its own level of fuckery. Unfortunately, that's always been a recurring theme in Mormonism. I know it's not the Book of Life, but in my opinion, the inverted one, you know. Who knows what's going through these people's minds? I mean, at a certain point, what you got to say about people who kill kids is that they're just off their fucking rocker. They're still accountable. They know the difference between right and wrong. And they should be buried under the jail or the prison. Like, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow are just evil fucking human beings. You know, I don't have a lot of sympathy for child killers. I don't have any sympathy for them, actually. It's a tragic situation. I'm sorry that those kids died as a result of it. They died because their mom was crazy and because Chad Daybell was crazy. Yeah, the thing of it is, even some fat, chubby, good-for-nothing reject like Chad Daybell, if he becomes a cult leader, can pull a hot blonde chick like Lori Vallow, you know. And ultimately, with these cults and these rejects like Chad Daybell, it's about sex. Like, it is inevitably always about sex and how much of it you can get by increasing your status, by promulgating and promoting really awful, sick shit in terms of your personal belief system. And 2 kids are dead as a result. Multiple adults are dead. And Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow are where they belong. They're in prison. Fuck them. Like, when they meet God, I don't really see how they're going to get out of it. And I say that as somebody who's benefited from the mercy of God more than anybody I know. I routinely refer to myself as God's favorite retarded son. Tylee was murdered the weekend of 9/8/19 when Chad's book publishing company sponsored an Operation Underground Railroad race in Rexburg the same weekend. Why am I not shocked? You know, there's one of my favorite Bible sections is in Ezekiel where Israel and Judah are allegorized as 2 sisters. And it says that on the same day that Israelites, the people of Judah, came into the temple, they came from a pagan god's temple, or a false god's temple, in order to sacrifice their children. So on the same day that they sacrificed their children, they were going to God's temple and offering sacrifice to him and worship to him. And nothing has changed in the present day. Not a fucking thing. This has been going on for thousands of years. 9/22/19 in Rexburg. The Firm Foundation was in town where Mel Gibson and David Warwick drove in just to attend and stayed at Laurie's apartment when he died. I don't know anything about that. What I do know is, in the limited amount of exposure I have to the Vallow and Daybell story, it's 2 people who are just fucking unhinged and who didn't have anything better to do, and ultimately were sexual deviants and adulterers, because ultimately, as I said earlier, it just comes back to sex every single fucking time with this. Hold on a sec. So difficult research, Crusher K. Easton. I see the 2 orgs as some sort of front. Well, most organizations are. They're a front for something else. Things are rarely as they seem with human endeavors. Very few people are who they actually say they are, or what they actually say they are, and it's Lies are complicated. The truth is usually pretty simple. Um, so if you're living truthfully, it tends to simplify things in terms of your activities and what you do and what you won't do. It tends to narrow your options to do horrible shit. And the people who lie about who they are do so for an obvious reason. They want to conceal unethical or immoral things that they're doing. So we've been going for about 3 hours. It's almost midnight. While I enjoy shitting on my haters on a weeknight, ultimately I am going to have to call it a night. I got some work to do in the morning, some things to wrap up as I go into the weekend. And if you want to subscribe at 1830goL.substack.com, that'd be great. You want to read the source documents that I use to write my content on IRA, you go to investigationsandritualabuse.com, and if you have any tips or evidence to offer, I am at goel at investigationsandritualabuse.com. We are reader funded and subscriber supported, so any financial support you can offer is much appreciated. I forget who it was who tipped me off recently to a site that compiles already searched for PACER documents. That's actually borne fruit in the past week. So that saved me a significant amount of money on some cases I've been looking at recently. So thanks to that person. I'm sorry your name escapes me at this point. It's been a good live stream, and I think this is a good place to cut it off. Thanks to everybody who watched over the course of the stream. And as I said, if you want to read more about this work, you can go to my Substack at Investigations of Ritual Abuse on Substack. It's the address is over here in the left-hand corner of the screen. Those are the relevant addresses and the relevant email. So Chad and Julie Rowe were meeting with Tom Harrison in the Salt Lake City office just before the murders in 2019. I'm sharing this information so that it might be relevant in the future. Again, Tom Harrison shows up in all the wrong places, around all the wrong people. I don't think that's a coincidence. I know when Dylan did his hit piece on Tom, it apparently had a very negative effect on Tom in terms of his emotions. But Tom also, like I said, shows up in the wrong place around the wrong people. And Tom is full of shit about his prophetic priesthood discernment. His little priesthood blessing on Tim Ballard that's been widely reported that Tim was going to be a successful politician and the future president of the church. Well, that obviously didn't come to pass. So I think we can chalk Tom's prophecies and priesthood discernment up to just bullshit, which is usually what that is for most Mormon men who get high on their own supply. Thanks to everybody who watched tonight. I'm going to wrap this up and cut it off. Lauren Matthias is who appeared on MSP. I don't know what that is. Mormon Stories podcast on those episodes. That's the Lauren I was talking about earlier. I'm telling you, it smells like shit. Well, most of Mormon Stories content does smell like that. I will say this. The corporation it accomplished the impossible. It made me feel bad for John DeLynn when they sued him here recently. I don't think anybody was confused about the church's branding versus John DeLynn's branding. Everybody was perfectly capable of understanding that John DeLynn is John DeLynn, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints leadership is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints leadership, and both were full of shit. Like, it's not a hard principle to understand. Like, both of them are grifters who are making a lot of money off of well-meaning people through tithing revenue and so on and so forth for the church. And then, of course, the donors of Mormon Stories podcast who think they're really striking one for Exmos and whatnot. Jody Hildebrandt, Gordon Bowen, and somewhat Tim Ballard's dreams and visions could be more connected than we think. Maybe. Oh, I think they're definitely connected on some level. Tom is, like I said, he keeps showing up in the wrong place with the wrong people. I don't think it's coincidence. DeLynn is still in the club, even though holding an ex-Mormon outward appearance. Well, there's some allegations that I am aware of that tend to bolster that thesis. I personally, I don't give a shit about John DeLynn. Like I said earlier, my impression of him has not changed, and that is, I didn't know they stack shit that high. That's my feeling about John. And what is it? Open Stories Foundation, OSF, whatever he calls that. That's apparently the 501c that Mormon Stories receives its financial backing from. DeLynn he's a useful fool for the church, and of course his donors are going to hand him money hand over fist to do whatever because they hate the church. And the church's donors and tithers are going to hand it money because they hate Exmos like DeLynn. And so it's two groups engaged in a pissing match with each other. The thing about throwing shit is that all you have at the end of it is hands that are covered in shit, and you just have shit all over you. And so John DeLynn and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints deserve each other. There are no heroes in that fight, folks. None. But, as I've continually said, like, it's a good place to stop the podcast. It's like, it is midnight, actually. And I need to get off of here and go get some sleep and prepare for tomorrow. I'll see you guys this weekend as I do more live streams on different topics and finish some of the Levitt stuff that I'm writing on. And so I'm going to have to table that last remark by Crusher K. Easton. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he was talking about Mormon Stories hitting $1 million. Money is very important to Latter-day Saints. It's a measure of their virtue because the Lord wouldn't provide it if they weren't hot shit. Of course, their Lord is Lucifer. So we'll let that go. Um, you'll always have enough when you follow God. You may not get rich, but you'll have enough to get by. And I give all praise and credit to God in that respect. So on that note, I'm going to hit the stop button. I'll see you guys this weekend. Look for more David Levitt stuff to drop over the next 5 to 7 days. So I finish up that story about his handyman and some other things. And we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good night.